culture, we can see that there's been a lot of exchange and back and forth. We have things like domestic plants that came up from Africa, we have architecture, we have art, we have food, we have words. There's a tremendous amount of evidence of this sort of exchange and clash of worlds. And you also see this ecologically. I'm a bit of a bird nerd myself. I know there's at least one other bird watcher in the audience. We're cooler than we sound. But just if you have a naturalist's eye and you're hanging out in Spain, you see the same thing. You see the same coming together. So in the same country, sometimes at the same time, you'll be seeing an assemblage of birds that you might just as well see where you're having afternoon tea in a garden in England, as well as things you might see on safari in Africa. These are all, from vastly different climates and ecologies, and yet they're all here in the middle in España. At the same time, we also have Spain being there we go. It's an important place for species that aren't just staying in one place, but for biological phenomena that are traveling across space. The most familiar, of course, are migratory birds. Two of the world's most important and biggest migratory flyways move through Spain at sort of a central point. So we have a lot of animals that are moving from their breeding grounds up in northern Europe down to overwintering places in Africa. And Spain is a major kind of point, a key place in that movement, often sort of like a choke point. If that wasn't there, it would really disrupt the connectivity. So to zoom in a little bit more to where I've been doing my work, I work at this research station dedicated to the Doñana Landscape and National Park. It's Europe's largest protected area. It's a really big area down here in the southwest sort of coastal tip of Spain. It's on the Africa side of things. It's hugely important for these migratory events I was talking about, also as a center for biodiversity, with different biological communities coming together from Spain, from Europe and Africa. It's consisting mainly of wetland habitats, which are very rare in Mediterranean landscapes, as you can imagine. And this protected area is sort of surrounded by a lot of other very important other land uses. So you can divide it up into sort of two parts. So one on the left here in blue, we have the natural part of the landscape. These are all of the the marismas, the wetlands themselves. Are very important. They're regulated just by the climate. They're at the mercy of what the weather does that year. And on the other side, there are a lot of agricultural areas, which of course are managed by people. So what we're seeing in this landscape then is on the natural side of things, because we're in a Mediterranean climate, year to year there's an enormous variation in what's going on. So the habitat can be really wet, which is great for a lot of species, or it can be really dry, which is not so great. Whereas on the other side, we're looking at artificial environments, we control where the water is. And so we make it the same pretty much every year. It's always there. It's always wet. We can put the water on the rice, we can take the water out of the rice, it's fine. What's happening now is that with people starting to develop the landscape a lot more for tourism reasons, people are using the water for often illegal agriculture, and also with climate change, making it generally drier, we're seeing a lot more of this than we ever saw of this. And that's a problem for a lot of animals, of course I'm focusing on birds, a lot of other things too, that rely on these resources. And as these are starting to disappear in the natural environments, we're seeing an overflow of these organisms starting to move into the artificial environments, which is not really something that a lot of conservation biologists and ecologists are prepared to deal with. It's become something that in the last 30, 40 years has become a major theme in conservation biology as it's been forming and maturing. And the question, of course, is, okay, well, what does this mean? What can we do with this? Are we able to support wildlife in these landscapes that aren't made for them? Can we do that? What does that mean for us? What is that going to mean for them? What can we do with that? There's a lot of questions we can ask. And hence enter La Gaviota sombría, the lesser blackback gull, which is my study species in my research. This is a migratory gull that breeds up throughout northern Europe, and they come down to Spain and Africa and a lot of the Mediterranean over the wintertime. This is a picture actually from one of my study sites. We can see thousands of them gathering in these rice fields. So we know there's a lot of them there, and we know they might be a really good way of learning about how water birds and other animals will navigate these landscapes. The other reason we like them is because we know a tremendous amount about them. They're part of a very large international research consortium of at least 6, but probably some other nations, of scientists from all over the world collaborating to study these birds. They're outfitting them with these radiologger backpacks, so we know where they are at all times. We can monitor their behaviors and things like that. So what I've been doing is trying to use this bird and what we know about it to start to answer some of these deeper ecological questions about what we can be doing with these landscapes as climate change continues. How can we manage our land, our place, and our resources to perhaps protect wildlife better? So, one thing I've been doing is actually going out into these rice fields, talking to rice farmers if I can understand them through their very thick accents, and tracking these birds, trying to get an idea of their behaviors, and somewhat less glamorously spending the vast majority of my time behind a computer doing a lot of statistical analysis and data exploring, trying to sift through the rich information we have to make some better conclusions about how these birds and how other animals might be using these landscapes. So to give you just some preliminary data here, these sort of pinkish salmon color points are areas where one particular bird, who was born in Belgium, came down and spent its time during the winter time, one particular winter in the rice fields on Lucia. And one pattern we've started to notice with a lot of birds is that between the early and late winter, they're doing completely different stuff. In the early winter is when the harvest and the tilling is going on in the fields. There's a lot going on. There's lots of invertebrate prey. There's an invasive crayfish that got introduced from Louisiana. Long story, but they love them and they eat them. It's great. And we're seeing them. This is here all the time. If we get to the later season, it gets kind of boring. The farmers aren't around anymore. The crayfish maybe aren't around anymore. A lot of them go underground if it gets cold. So suddenly they seem to be spreading out more across the landscape. One thing I've been doing recently is integrating these data across time to create probabilistic models where essentially you're trying to ask the algorithm, well, okay, if I had to choose randomly, where would be the place this animal is most likely to be found? So these isopleps here are displaying the probability of finding that organism in space. The redder or darker blue colors show us where this bird is spending most of its time. And we see that in both cases, the rice fields are still where they're always hanging out. But when the food starts to run out, they're going someplace else. There's a dump over here, and there's another reserve over here that also has a bunch of trash and some landfills. So presumably, there's actually some community